So I come across all this weird stuff like somebody buying a 30-day MetroCard for $70 and using it only 3 times. But yeah, it's kind of strange. You can also look up the last place you used it. There's no database that I could find that correlates this information to anything that's publicly available. But kind of by brute forcing it, you can create a database of places where you know the card has been used last. I'm sure there's something on here where I have. Okay. Well, first of all, let me show you a standard card. Okay, so this is a card that has, I think, $13 remaining, something like that. Okay, and notice how the reason only $1.50 was deducted is because the last use was at a PATH station. The PATH stations only charge $1.50. You can see this is a standard full fare card. On the first record, the value is $15. On the second record, the value is $13.50. And sometimes these reverse themselves. I'm not sure exactly what determines whether or not they're going to write the first record on the front or the back of the card. But usually the current record is on the back of the card and the previous record is on the front of the card, although sometimes that does change. And the way the machines probably tell the difference is you can see the number of times used is greater in the field that has the latest data on it. Anyway, so you can see how here, when a value is deducted from the card, it keeps the previous data in the last record. And so if you look at a card, if you had swiped a card with $2 on it a couple of months ago before they applied the firmware patch, you'd see this, where record 1 has $2 and record 2 has $0. And to any machine in the MTA, it would show that you have no value remaining. But on buses and subways, if you create a read error on the second track, in the second record, I'm sorry, it will only read the first record as a fallback because it doesn't want to, they didn't want to create delays again at the turnstiles, and you'll be able to do that. The problem is you can't destroy the stripe. It has to be able to write back and verify that it wrote back to the card before you can actually enter the subway. So what you would do before is you would bend the card, you would swipe it once, it would get a read error, you would swipe it again, you'd still have a read error, and then you'd unbend it so that it could write back to the card and verify that it successfully wrote back, because the only place you could use the card again is at that same turnstile. You do it again, and it writes back to the card that you have no value remaining on both records, and then it lets you into the subway. So you could only do it once per card. But this was sort of a common thing, and nobody really understood how it was happening. They applied the patch, like I said, so that if you have $2, if you have less than 1 fare remaining after you've swiped the card, so that goes up to $3.99, I think, if there's a value up to $3.99 on the card, you swipe it again, and it will make you swipe it again and rewrite that record on both, rewrite the current record on both records. What they didn't do is apply that universally, so that if you have $10 remaining on the card and you swipe it once, you have $8 remaining, you can do the exact same thing with $8 remaining on the card, swipe it again, and the turnstile will write back that you have $10 remaining on the card. So you could kind of keep doing this regardless of whether or not they updated the firmware or not. And it's just kind of one of those things that they say they fixed the problem. Nobody's really going to investigate it because they figure, okay, fine, the MTA knows what's happening now and they fixed it and this will never work again. But unless you actually know what data is on the card, you can't really decide whether or not there's any other ways to exploit it. In this case, there still is a way to exploit it. Whereas, like I said, if you have more than 1 fare remaining on the card after you swipe it. And so they still haven't really fixed the problem, and it's kind of one of those fundamental flaws that without reflashing everything and making all these cards invalid, they're not going to be able to fix. But it's just one of those things. There's a couple of, stories I can tell about weird things that I found. For example, at my school now, the school that I go to, we use mag stripes on our identification cards, and what they have across the town is sort of point of sale machines throughout the town that my college is in, linked to each student's ID card, and so you can basically swipe your ID card and charge a meal to your card or charge a drink or whatever. And what happens to be on the card is a student identification number, and that happens to be your social security number. What they do across campus is use this for entry into the dorm rooms, and some people have access to certain dorm rooms, other people have access to other things. The campus police obviously have access to everything. So if you can get your hands on one of their social security numbers, you suddenly have access to every building on campus. So there's by looking around and seeing what's on every card, you could kind of see how things could be manipulated. Another security thing that they have is if you lose your card, they append an additional number onto your ID. So, for example, if I lost my card once, I would have my social security number and then 02. If I lost it again, I would have 03. And so it's really crappy as far as preventing fraud, because if any student was to come across this and start cloning cards, it's very easy to get people's social security numbers. You could withdraw funds from their account. You could get into their dorms. You can do all sorts of things like that. In the student computer center, they have printers that require you to swipe your MagStripe card in, with all built into the keyboards. And if you create an error by typing a digit and swiping the card, the social security number and the appendix to that come up on the screen. So you can get people's information that way. If you're quick, you can type in somebody's social security number and hit enter, and it'll think that the MagStripe reader read it, but it really didn't. So you don't even have to make a new card with the student's information on it. So there's all these weird things that you can do with this. Mainly the simplicity of building a reader, with spare parts and whatever. Last time I had a lot of questions, so I'll stop here. And if anybody has questions, feel free to ask. I don't have anything that works reliably right now. It's possible to, I don't have the software on with me right now, but I was playing with generating the waveforms for encoding your own stripes if you want to. It's really not hard to write the software, and it's really not hard to get the waveform generated properly given the raw binary data. But it is hard to get the timing right. I'm not so good at building things. I can, you can find a solution where you have a motor rolling the card through at a constant velocity, so you could get very accurate timing that way, or you can just do trial and error, which I've been doing, and it doesn't work so well. To do this, you need an amplifier at the output of your sound card. You're not just gonna write to a card using the output of your sound card. You'll fry the final amplifier or whatever. But I mean, it's possible, but I wouldn't recommend doing it. You could build a little audio amplifier to do this out of like an LM386 or something. That should provide enough power for most loco cards. You may also have to bypass the output capacitors for your sound card. There's capacitors at the output of your sound card which prevent DC output. So if you can bypass those, you can get a nice DC waveform out. It's hard to do on a lot of sound cards now. You can do them more easily on the old ISA sound cards and stuff like that. But it's something to play with. You can certainly do it. It's just not as easy as reading. It's not something you could do in a half hour, I don't know, on a weekend or something. But yes, it can be done. You can write the software to do it. It's just a matter of creating the hardware to accurately write to the stripe. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
1 minute, please wait for the microphone.
The people who run the public transport system, did they try to stop you from spreading this information?
No, I never got. I have a feeling that if I was going to be contacted about it, I would have been contacted before I published anything. I went on off the hook with some of the information before I ever published the article with the alias Redbird, kind of because the old subway trains that they were phasing out happened to be called Redbirds, so I kind of used that. Nobody ever contacted me then through the show. Nobody's contacted me from the MTA since. I've been contacted by, like cops and private investigators and stuff like that, just asking about it and stuff like that. But I don't really like dealing with those people. But nobody from the MTA has actually contacted me, and I'm not sure that they know about the second way of card bending, which is, like I mentioned, if you have more than one ride remaining, because most people aren't willing to mess with their cards if they know they have value on it. So for their purposes, it's probably effectively solved the problem. But from the standpoint of whether or not an exploit still exists, it's certainly still there. You got to be careful when experimenting with this kind of stuff. I was in the subway when I first started doing this, and I was playing with the turnstile and some cards and whatever. I was down there for maybe 5 minutes, and I had gotten the turnstile to open a couple of times and kind of just walked through and walked immediately back out. I had no interest in actually going anywhere. And two plainclothes officers came down and were like, "Let me see your MetroCard." I'm like, "What?" I had like 200 of them in my pocket, and I gave him one, and he was like, "Oh," and they ended up giving me a $70 ticket for turnstile manipulation, which I don't even know if that was something that they've ever done before, but I just paid it. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Have you found out if you're able to add money to your card at the MTA system?
Okay, well, like I mentioned, there's a couple of fields on the card that I'm not exactly sure what they are, and I have a feeling the last one may be a checksum that I don't know how to calculate. So as far as actually adding anything to the card, I don't know how to do that. I can't do that right now. As far as copying cards, you can very easily make a magstripe copier. Basically, you have a reader in parallel with a writer, amplify the output from the reader, and swipe a blank card through, and you could very easily make a copy. If you want, you could copy cards. There's the checksums are already calculated for you. Other than that, no, I don't know how to make a card from scratch with the values that I want on it. Let me explain a little bit. The whole MetroCard system is actually offline. It has to be that way because the buses aren't constantly connected to the network. And if there's a network failure in the subway, you can't have millions of passengers stranded until the network guys get it back up again. So the whole thing operates offline. However, they do have the ability to track and disable serial numbers. So if they notice anything funky with a card, like, wow, the same serial number's been swiped 5 times and each time it has $10 remaining on it, they'll disable it. And apparently there is a way to know whether or not this is happening at one particular subway station. They have each token booth has computers, and apparently there's a way to track this. I don't know the details of it. I've only talked to a couple of MTA employees, and they didn't really know all of the details about it. But I've heard of people getting in trouble for playing with this. When the MTA system first came out, someone had copied a card onto an 8-track tape, glued a piece of 8-track tape to a piece of cardboard, made a copy exactly the way I just explained, just amplifying the output from one and copying it onto the other, and swiped it through and got arrested actually because a cop saw him swiping a piece of cardboard. But I have heard other stories of people getting in trouble for making copies of MetroCards, which really isn't hard to do, and swiping it a bunch of times. My purpose wasn't to get arrested; it was just to find out how it works. So I don't know how easy it is to track. Any other questions? And okay, well, I guess thanks for your time, and if you have any other questions, just come up to me.